Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 467. Great Apocalypse. Part 1. Yours getting nearer. The system message whispered in my ear. It had been repeating itself over and over again for the past few days. It seems that it won't be long now. Yes. My mother and I were sitting face to face over a table, drinking tea together. We were watching the display panel installed in the industrial complex's reception room. The American continent annihilated. What's the next target for these outer gods? Emergency evacuation order issued in Northeast Asia. Nebulas have abandoned Earth. There is no place left to run. The last place the news program showed was the Korean peninsula. Refugees streaming in from all over the world ensured that the whole peninsula was bucking raucously even now. I was well aware of what they were hoping for by coming here. Next great apocalypse scenario location is Northeast Asia. 6 days, 8 hours, and 24 minutes remaining until the start of the great apocalypse scenario. My mother inside the panel was making an announcement in my stead as the representative of the industrial complex. The industrial complex won't stop accepting new citizens. However, my mother smiled bitterly and spoke. It's quite embarrassing to watch, isn't it? But it suits you well. You're like the president, actually. In all honesty, it was fine to think of my mother as the current master of the industrial complex, not me. The citizens of this place would rather listen to her more than me, at any rate. You should show your face to Seoul's residents at least once before leaving, son. Even a simple greeting from you will become a great source of strength to them. For sure, I could hear the reporters using megaphones to shout their questions from outside the industrial complex. Demon King of Salvation Nim. Is it true that you have returned? Demon King of Salvation Nim. Please tell us your plan to stop the apocalypse. My plan, is it? I smiled bitterly, just like my mother. If that's the duty of the mascot, then well. We quietly sipped the tea. The skies were dark and gloomy. So gloomy, in fact, it'd not be strange to see a thunderbolt fall from the sky out of the blue and shatter the peninsula in half. It's so peacefully, isn't it? I guess so, mother. Even so, we said those things. The tea leaf inside the cup gently trembled. To think, I'd enjoy such a leisurely tea time. This would be the first time in our 30-something years of relationship as a mother and son. The event I so wanted to experience only came knocking on my doorstep as the apocalypse of everything approached us. My mother, she didn't ask me anything. Not a thing about what I would do from now on, what I would gain at the end of this story, nothing. I knew that was how she operated, though. Well, I'll be on my way now. The heavenly wind god was searching for you. Before you embark, please do make sure to speak to him first. Pungbik? Why was he looking for me this time? I couldn't help but recall that unpleasant incident back in the Great War of Saints and Demons. Was he thinking of doing something uncouth again just before the final scenario? I lightly nodded my head and exited the room. There was someone waiting for me there. And here we are. You somehow managed to get this far, Kim Dokja. It was none other than Bai Hyung, looking so much better than before after becoming a great dakibi. The long coat fashioned out of a white tiger's fur really suited him well. I spoke in a sarcastic tone of voice. You were actually waiting for me? The reunion of you and your mother is a pretty popular fable among your subscribers. So, I just couldn't bear to interrupt the flow. Bai Hyung shrugged his shoulders and spoke up. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is dabbing her eyes away. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is grumbling while handing over a handkerchief. This damn guy, sending that out as another broadcast. And so, the final scenario is literally just around the corner. I know. How reliable you are. I'm sure you already know this, but the final scenario is, Bai Hyung. My quiet call stopped the dakibi from talking anymore. He stared at me. Why did you select us? A faint ripple spread within Baihyung's eyes. I already knew what was written on the scenario window that popped up before his eyes. Plus. Main scenario number 98, candidate ballot type, main. Difficulty? Clear condition, please choose the final candidate for the one single fable. Time limit. Reward? Failure, death. Plus. Starstream-S scenarios didn't only apply to constellations and incarnations, but to the storytellers like Dakabais, too. And the candidate ballot that would decide the end of all scenarios was an incredibly important scenario for all Dakibis. It was a scenario where they had to bet their own existence. And in such a scenario, Baihyung had chosen us. Great Dakibi Baihyung has currently cast his vote with Kim Dokja Company. When I first met this guy, he was no bigger than a soccer ball. He was a true Dakibi who indiscriminately massacred people for the sake of increasing the number of subscribers in the channel, and he mass-produced horrifying scenarios on the fly. That very Dakibi, who grew up by devouring the fables we created, had eventually morphed into a human-like being. He was as tall as a human, he wore clothes like a human, and he was making expressions of a human, too. That very Dakibi, he was looking at me on a similar eye level as he spoke up. Sign the contract with me. I shall make you the next Dakibi king. That's what you said to me inside that fish dragon's mouth. Indeed, I did say something like that in the past. Hang on, could it be that you selected us while believing in that rubbish? There are very low odds of us winning, you know. It's not like that anymore. I see that you still have no idea how big of a deal what you did was. Baihyung shifted his gaze outside the window. The plaza of the industrial complex was filled with the constellations that fought with us in the battle against Papyrus. The black flame dragon got subdued by Uriel and was currently acting as her cushion. Persephone and Hades were quietly sipping tea on a prepared table. The great sage, meanwhile, had borrowed a pipe-like cigarette from the Breaking the Sky Sword saint and was busy puffing away. They were watching the Starstream broadcasts unfolding in real time. A brand new list naming 12 nebulas are making rounds among the gossipers of Starstream. A portion of Fable-grade constellations estimate that Kim Dokja Company could very well be the third strongest. Third strongest, was it? It seemed that the ripples from the last battle were larger than I thought. I was thankful for the generous assessment, but it was still too early to let our guard down. Because the war for the candidate ballot hadn't ended yet. However, Baihyung's thoughts seemed to be a bit different from mine. I think it'll be fine for a little while. It's been 2 days since you defeated Papyrus. Did any other nebula request Kim Dokja Company for internebula warfare since then? No. No one. A nebula that achieves a big win during the candidate ballot battles will enjoy much higher odds of being selected as the one single fable. Just like how one battle helped climb up to the third strongest position, other nebulas could also participate in the internebula warfare and alter the rankings. So, messages of declarations of war or announcements of one soon to take place should be raining down on us by now. However, forget about a declaration, not a single nebula tried to provoke us. The planet Earth was surprisingly peaceful. But, why? It's not as if our fable is that shocking, now was it? That's because you're going to be annihilated even if they leave you alone. That's why. I felt my heart cool down in an instant. I could see the footage playing on the constellations panels. Constellations know that you simply can't forsake Earth. Separate from the candidate ballot battles, Earth had entered the Great Apocalypse sequence. The North American continent was already no more, and next up was Northeast Asia. Back in the original story's final scenario, outer gods and the rulers of other worlds also began invading this world. The ascension of the Forgotten Islands are still ongoing. At the end of the world line, the corrosion of the forgotten beings will begin. According to the original storyline, nebulas and I should have been fighting together here. But now, they had made a different decision. They gave up on Earth, and to eliminate Kim Dokja Company. That was the decision made by the nebulas facing the final scenario. Those sons of bitches. A portion of nebulas are mocking your decision. You could say that this was the worst possible situation. To make matters worse, the outer gods flooding into this world were different from the ones that I knew of from the original storyline. I recalled Oriel from the 999th regression turn I met in the Nyas forest some time ago. Once the Great Apocalypse scenario begins, the attacks from the kings will commence. If my predictions were correct, then the kings showing up for the Great Apocalypse soon to get underway should be the existences that witnessed the conclusion during the 999th regression turn. And Kim Dokja Company needed to fight against them. Who summoned the kings? Was it your people from the Bureau? I can't reveal any information to you. Except that, Bai Hyung formed an expression showing his firm resolve and finished what he wanted to say. Until the moment I breathe my last, I shall tell my story with you. Asterisk. If you don't wish to participate, it's fine to leave now. Funnily enough, this was the first thing I said to my companions. The next scenario is incomparably horrifying than any other battles we've been through so far. It's not too late. If any of you wish to leave the nebula, then... A couple of them began yawning as if they were listening to a boring Sunday mass. But, that was obvious. These people right before my eyes had survived dozens of life-threatening events together to get this far. To them, there was no difference to dying in this or that event. If they want to leave, they would have done so already. I too knew this. Even then, the reason why I had to ask the obvious question was, "Excuse me?" Because there was someone who did want to leave for real. I'd like to sit out this one. And it was none other than Han Myung-oh. It wasn't as if I didn't expect this. He carried on. I'm not saying I'll completely leave the nebula. However, there is a place I wish to visit for one last time. E.G. Hai next to him retorted unhappily. F you, a juicy, why don't you just leave? You aren't much of a help, anyway. You'll just run away like your ass is on fire once the fighting starts, right? I might be like this, but back in my heyday when I was a count in the demon world. Originally, the words demon world and count in that sentence should have been replaced by Minosoft director. Watching them go back and forth brought about a wry grin on my face. Actually, I knew where Han Myung-oh wished to go. Are you thinking of going to where the Isle of Reincarnators used to be? My question caused Han Myung-oh's expression to harden visibly. I carried on. Even if the area's been sealed, the after effects of the apocalypse dragon and indescribable distance still linger there. That place will still be considerably dangerous. Even then, I'd like to go and take a look. The Isle of Reincarnators, where the great war of saints and demons took place. Even now, corpses of dead stars and outer gods should be floating around aimlessly near the vicinity of the dark dimension. Those beings that failed to get on the ark and got killed in the process. Perhaps the demon king Asmodeus was among them. That child is everything I've earned in this world. The light of determination shone within Han Myung-oh's eyes. Post-Great War, he diligently participated in the main scenarios with us. He was working incomparably harder than back when he used to steal certain projects away from his subordinates for the sake of advancing his career. And he got to taste the fruit of his labor, too. Although small, he still earned a share of a great fable, and even acquired several useful star relics in the process, too. All of that was to help him search for his daughter. The current him might be able to withstand the chaos's after effects lingering around Isle of Reincarnator for a few days. Please, be careful out there. Han Myung-oh nodded his head, finished his preparations, and stood up. Looked to me he had already made up his mind before coming here. Companions all bade him good luck. Not receiving the one single fable scenario didn't automatically mean there would be no one single fable, it existed for everyone. Just like how anyone could embark on a journey to search for their own. I watched him tremble in fear as he stepped foot inside the portal and began thinking about something. Yours getting nearer. It wasn't Starstream that decided where your conclusion might be. I looked back to discover that my companions were waiting for me. I shall continue with the meeting. Asterisk. 11 hours and 8 minutes until the start of the Great Apocalypse scenario. Only about half a day remained before the Great Apocalypse. If we managed to withstand this apocalyptic event, we'd be able to enter the final scenario. In the meantime, I went through all the information in the original story, and requested for the acquisition of every useful remaining star relic and skill found not just in the Korean peninsula, but the rest of the planet as well. Companions easily okayed my request. Han Suyang asked, "And what will you do?" Of course, I too had something to do. For instance, thinking up of a new sure-kill technique with this uptight dude. "You fool must surely know this by now. There is only one way for us to fight against the Great Apocalypse," said Yu Young-hyuk, while polishing the edges of the dark heavenly demon sword. Uriel, the Black Flame Dragon, the Great Sage and other constellations promised to lend us their aid, but we couldn't rely on them all the time. Even after excluding the secretive plotter, there were 4 more king-level outer gods still to appear. If all of them decided to attack simultaneously, then we wouldn't be able to win even if the myth-grade constellations such as the Great Sage and the King of Underworld were with us. However, we did have one method we could use to fight back. The Hellscape of Eternity. The reward of the 1863rd regression turn, the myth-grade fable I earned through the secretive plotter. With this fable, I could recreate Yu Young-hyuk's memories, and he could rouse up the powers of the 1863rd turn and use it by sharing that stage of memories with me. The only problem was, reading has failed. The highest Yu Young-hyuk's regression turn you can read currently is 978. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, is looking at you with criticizing eyes. Something had gone wrong with my reading ability. Reading has failed. The highest Yu Young-hyuk's regression turn you can read currently is 778. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, is wondering if you have dyslexia. And now, even the fable was beginning to mock me. This thing continued on for several days now, and Yu Young-hyuk, unable to hold it back anymore, finally blew his top. How pathetic. Did you not say you've been reading books for all your life? It's not all my life, you know. In any case, this is a different sort of problem. I also had no idea. Why was this happening only now? If this problem persists, you better hand over the fable to me. It'll be simpler if I use it myself. I'd have given you already if only I could. I had already asked the secretive plotter about it. He simply ignored me, though. In that case, use that possession skill from the last time. Use that, then activate the fable. The rate of assimilation goes higher if you do. He must have been talking about the Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint here. I'd like not to rely on that if I can. For sure, activating Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint would make using the fable so much simpler. That skill's effect was similar to a sponsor taking over the control of an incarnation. However, using that skill leaves my incarnation body defenseless. So, it's for the best to win without resorting to it if possible. How laughable. This is the result of neglecting your training every day. Do you honestly think everyone can train to a ridiculous degree like you? Yu Young-hyuk glared at me for a short while before focusing on the fable once more without saying anything else. He probably already knew the truth, that the reason for my unwillingness to rely on Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint was actually something else. For a while now, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint stopped listening to Kim Dokja's commands. Not only that, the skill would activate when I least wanted it to and start reading people's minds. I wasn't sure why such a thing was happening. It was possible that I got too used to looking inside someone's head. I had gotten too used to reading nicely laid out sentences of their inner thoughts rather than listening to their actual words. Reading has failed. Maybe, me suddenly developing an inability to read was an obvious consequence. Focus properly, Kim Dokja. I reactivated the fable after hearing Yu Young-hyuk's rebuke. I slowed down my breathing and collected my thoughts. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, has begun its storytelling. I should forget about all the info I knew on Yu Young-hyuk. I knew nothing about him. This guy, he was a complete stranger to me. Yu Young Hyuk was not some crazed psychopath, nor was he an impregnable stubborn idiot either. When I thought like that, it felt as if the inside of my head was clearing up just a little. Right, I should start from there. Just like back at that moment when I read The Ways of Survival for the first time. Su-cha-cha-chat. It was right then that something strange occurred. A problem has occurred during your reading attempt. Suddenly, Yu Young Hyuk's complexion paled greatly. Kim Dokja. You fool, what have you? Those were his last words, as the light disappeared from within his eyes. I was taken by surprise and hurriedly asked him. Hey, are you alright? There was no answer. Character Yu Young Hyuk's egos are colliding. Egos were colliding? Growing even more urgent now, I tried to confirm his current status, but then. Character list has failed to activate. The text that appeared afterwards was a sentence that I heard quite a long time ago. Applicable individual is not a character. Chapter 468. Great Apocalypse. Part 2. The unconscious Yu Young Hyuk didn't want to wake up even after 4 hours passed by. Hey, you crazy idiot. Wake up. Han Soo-young and I took turns slapping his cheeks. Unfortunately, he still showed no signs of waking up at all. Slap. 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 Also, his damn cheeks were so hard that even the concerted slapping from both of us failed to puff them up. Our palms went numb from pain, instead. Han Soo-young spoke in a genuinely impressed tone of voice. You know, this is kind of fun? This is no time to crack jokes like that. 5 hours and 12 minutes remaining until the start of the Great Apocalypse scenario. We really didn't have much time left. Soon, the Great Apocalypse will commence, and the outer gods would start invading us due to the expanding probability. But now, Yu Young Hyuk was in this state. I couldn't even begin to guess what went wrong where. Was this related to my omniscient reader's viewpoint, somehow? Character list has failed to activate. Applicable individual is not a character. I tried using character list one more time, but the resulting message was the same. There were a lot of Yu Young Hyuks in this universe, but that message only ever appeared with just one. That Yu Young Hyuk of the 1863rd regression turn, disappearing towards his own story. When I got that far, I began thinking of something. But, could it really be? Iseol, while watching on from the side, asked a question. Should we feed him the life and death pill? Not too long ago, she finally managed to perfect the ultimate recovery medicine, the life and death pill. This elixir could apparently cure any and all fatal wounds when ingested. Have you already reached the level of mass-producing it? No, not yet. I was only able to concoct a few. Didn't have enough ingredients. I could only sigh. Since we didn't know what might happen, we couldn't afford to carelessly waste the life and death pill. Character Yu Young Hyuk's egos are colliding. On top of that, we weren't sure if the problem of one's ego could be solved by the life and death pill either. It was then, a slight vibration reverberated throughout the industrial complex. Dokja SSI, we've detected movement. Lee Hyun-sung opened the sick bay's door and hurriedly entered. Han Soo-young and I looked at each other at the same time. I urgently switched the display panel on and the Pacific Ocean situation soon filled it up. Kugugugugu. The wave that swallowed up the American continent revealed itself once more. Transparent dome walls had stopped the wave, and it was steadily increasing its water level, instead. The probability was still restricting it, that was why. Suchachachuchit. However, that probability's wall was being pushed back bit by bit. The border that crossed the vast Pacific was gradually widening its diameter. We could also see the outer gods wiggling about in between the rising waves. In 5 hours' time, that border would reach the Korean peninsula, and this land would disappear from the face of this earth. Kim Dokja. A plan? I do have one, said I, before glancing at the unconscious Yu Young Hyuk and adding something else. Although, it looks like I'll have modified it a bit now. Stop making me worried, alright? How did that thing get stopped back in the original storyline? Nebulas all desperately fought together. Most of the constellations were ground down to fine dust, trying to stop that. Where are those oh-so-mighty constellations, then? What do you mean, where? Many constellations are watching your judgment. Most likely, they were busy spectating on our apocalypse. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is criticizing other constellations, asking them if the ideals of righteousness and Starstream have all withered away. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is crossing his arms and shaking his head. Constellation, most ancient liberator, finds the constellations of the large nebulas quite pathetic. Even though constellations from our side provoked them, they remained composed in their replies. A portion of constellations argue that all of this was brought upon by Kim Dokja Company themselves. Some of them even began arguing that it was our fault, too. A small number of constellations argues that it's Kim Dokja Company that stole away their shares first. Now normally, such an argument was utter drivel with no leg to stand on, but for some reason, my mind remained calm even after hearing them. Because I roughly knew why they were acting like this. Back when we went to visit Oz, the monkey told me this. Many fables that constitute great fables have all entered the path of stagnation, similar to Oz's situation. A certain fable that has appeared in recent times have begun eating into the percentages of other fables, you see. I'm talking about you people's fable. Originally, the main actors leading this stage should have been the nebulas that had been compiling their myths for a long time. However, several of them either lost the important fables to us or got destroyed in the process. In the midst of all this, Starstream even decided to grandly label us as the third strongest nebula, so the sense of deprivation the existing stars felt must have been indescribable. Of course, it didn't mean that what these stars were doing right now was correct or justified. Han Suyang, chewing on her nails, asked, "Isn't it better to give up on Earth? How about we come up with the way to reach the final scenario with everyone, instead?" You know that's not going to happen. Only the ones permitted could reach the final scenario. Even if everyone on Earth was inducted into Kim Dokja Company, the aftermath of the probability storm caused by the nonsensical scenario jump would ensure our complete destruction. God damn it. I could sense predictive plagiarism spinning its gears vigorously inside her head. You said that these outer god kings are beings from the 999th turn. How many are there, anyway? From what I know, there are 4 excluding the secretive plotter. Are we going to fight all 4 of them at the same time? I shook my head and recalled the list of the outer god kings I memorized back then. The living flame that rises up from the east. The master of the sunken island, the calamity of the world in the west. The monarch of the great abyss, the ruler of the northern universe. The king of Silverlight Heart, the ruler of the interstellar space in the south. The beings that became the outer god kings after witnessing the conclusion of the 999th regression turn. However, even if this was the bureau we were talking about, I wasn't convinced that they'd insert every king into this scenario. They didn't really like the scenarios that they couldn't control, after all. Which meant one has appeared in the Pacific Ocean. And when all of our forces start moving, one more should show up. That would make 2 kings. Okay, so one is the Pacific Ocean bastard, and the other will be Uriel, from the 999th turn. Correct. How strong are they? I only saw for a brief moment back then. Well, Uriel from the 999th turn is responsible for leaving the secretive plotter in that state, so yeah. Son of a bitch. And something like that is going to show up with underlings, too? Han Suyang clearly witnessed the power of secretive plotter during the battle against the Apocalypse Dragon. So, her reaction couldn't be seen as over the top. Constellations of our channel will definitely help us, right? Even if they help us, there is no guarantee of our victory. Most importantly, we won't be at our full combat strength, with Yu Yonghyuk missing. My original plan was to split the companions in 2 to divide and conquer the outer god kings. However, if the main combatant Yu Young Hyuk were to go missing from the picture, then we won't be able to rely on the 1863rd turn's power to survive. Kwa 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 kwa. We saw the wave gradually widening its area of influence through the display panel. It'd be too late if we started defending ourselves when the boundaries of the Great Apocalypse reached the Korean peninsula. I quickly came to a new decision. Let's get moving. I'll tell you what you must do. 5 hours remained. We needed to finish our preparation within this time frame. Asterisk. While Han Soo-young was busy conveying my new plan to our companions, I went to talk to Lee Gil-young. After hearing my summons, the boy quickly rushed into the reception room with a bright expression. Hyung. You called for me? What's up? I nodded my head. Please sit over here. He quickly sat down on the couch and looked up at me with his sparkling eyes as if he couldn't wait to hear what I had to say. I stared deeply into his eyes. The child who used to think of this world as a game. Even now, the memories of the moments I first met Lee Gil-young remained fresh in my head. It was a nightmare filled with the flickering overhead lights of the subway and grasshoppers all leaping up into the air simultaneously. If Lee Gil-young hadn't caught any insects that day, the one to die would have been me. The insect-collecting boy without a mother was now old enough to be a middle school student. I didn't save his mother that day. What would have happened if I made a different choice back then? For instance, what if my disgust towards humans was less intense? What if I didn't notice the injuries on the boy's arm while grabbing the grasshoppers? What if I didn't have a habit of hastily guessing a person's history with just a few circumstantial evidence? What if I hadn't read The Ways of Survival? What if I wasn't Kim Dokja? Sorry. Ing? I'm sorry, Hyung. Lee Gil-young had his head lowered, his shoulders trembling from trepidation like a child about to be handed down a scary punishment. Was it because I looked scary? Or was it because of some other reason? Lee Gil-young continued on. But, I didn't have a choice. If I hadn't signed the contract, Shin Yu-sung might have. Only then did I realize what he was trying to say. And this boy signed the contract with the devil in order to protect his precious something. A certain moment from the journey to the west brushed past my view. Right, I witnessed it clearly, didn't I, the yellowish storm erupting out from the boy's figure while being surrounded by the 9 stars. Lee Gil-young was talking about that time. I do remember you telling me to never use my sponsor's powers. I swear, I didn't deliberately break our promise. I really. As the boy spoke incoherently, I placed my hand on his head. You did well. Eh? The boy's eyes grew wider, so I spoke with more conviction in my voice. You did well. Without you, we'd have all died back then. I was aware of how tough it had been for this boy. Because I also knew only too well the sorrow of watching your companions die before your eyes and unable to do anything about it. Lee Gil-young must have felt the same. However, doing it again is going to be troublesome. You know this, don't you? With your powers. I don't want to. What's that? If the same things happen again, I'll make the same choice. I'll rely on that power again. I'll protect Shin Yu-sung and my companions. But, Gil-young. He hesitated slightly before avoiding my hand. He raised his head, and I saw several complicated emotions swirling within his eyes. It seemed that I wasn't the only one who had made up his mind. I know you called me here to scold me. But, I came here to tell you this, too. I'm not a little kid anymore, Hyung. I'm also qualified, you know. Just like everyone else, I reached this far by beating back all the scenarios. I inwardly swallowed back my gasps. I knew this already. I did, but... The fourth wall's voice could be heard next, sounding thoroughly unimpressed by my thoughts. D'entrée at him like a kid you are mo re like a kid. Gil-young is still a kid. Youcant fig ht without high minua. Kim Dok Ja, AC Ting L like a NICE per son du EScent suit YOU dot. I knew that. But still, that didn't mean. Diond wa RRY, my FR Yend will he LP dot. Your friend? It was then, a transparent wall like something wavered around Yi Gilyong, accompanied by Tsuchachit noise. The fourth wall is responding to its friend. I cautiously reached out towards the empty air. Something was there. This sensation of touching a wall, I was familiar with it. However, this wall was still incomplete. I finally understood several things just then. So, that's how it was. That wall was now with this child. H. Young, even if you say no, He must have felt scared by my hand reaching out to the empty air, because he started shouting in a shaky voice. I quickly lowered my hand and held his. I remained still while holding his hands tightly until his shivering gradually calmed down. You're right, Gilyong Hyung? We can't see the conclusion without your help. We need you during the scenario we are about to enter. I slowly blinked my eyes. I couldn't help it now. I had to acknowledge our current situation where I had no choice but to rely on a hurting child. I had to treat preciously the boy's heart that had to mature far too quickly for his age, and his courage he had to display first. And to reward that courage, I too had to become honest here. Even if that's true, I won't let you fight all alone. This is my desire, and I won't ever back down from this. Can you understand that, Gilyong? Yi Gilyong slowly nodded his head. He wiped his tears and smiled happily. My heart ached, thinking about how I had to go to war with this child in tow. Unfortunately, it was now time to cross that bridge. I want to speak to your sponsor. My words caused Yi Gilyong's eyes to quake, quite noticeably. But, Hyung. That guy, it's... Don't worry. The reason why I didn't want to use his sponsor was because that guy was simply too dangerous. Will you truly not come with me? You'll become stronger much faster if you stick with me instead of him. Even then, you wish to stay behind? Yu Younghyuk must have known this too, and that's why he tried to take Yi Gilyong away. What a fox-like sly bastard. I gently grasped the shoulders of worried Yi Gilyong and spoke. Your Hyung is now a myth-grade constellation, you know. If it was a few days ago, I'd have avoided making this choice if at all possible. But the story was different now. I lightly sucked in my breath, and while looking up, spoke in my true voice. I know you're watching, so come out. The moment the tone of my voice changed, a heavy reverberation spread out around us. Sparks completely inundated the reception room and Yi Gilyong's expression changed. As his brows furrowed in pain, his eyes became white next. I realized what was happening here, so I quickly broke past the probability storm and tightly grasped the boy's shoulder. I don't remember telling you to descend. Su-cha-cha-chat. The after effects from the probability storm lessened significantly, and all sorts of pain rushed into my arm. But, I ably endured it. If I didn't go with this much showmanship, then I'd not be able to negotiate properly with this guy. Your status is suppressing the after effects of a localized probability storm. Yi Gilyong's expression regained its calm rapidly. And right in the next instance, sounds akin to the beatings of insect wings came out from his mouth, currently looking as if empty darkness had taken over. I'm familiar with waiting, yet you have taken far too long. This voice sounded as if millions of locusts were crashing in at the same time. Chapter 469. Great Apocalypse. Part 3. It had become dark outside the windows. I wondered if the sun had set already, but when I took a closer look, I realized that insects were sticking to the glasses. Locusts were glaring at me while scurrying around, their antennae swaying threateningly about. I glanced at the plague of locusts and spoke up. Compared to how long you had to endure, your waiting this time wouldn't have been all that much. So stop exaggerating. You, what do you know about waiting? The creature's words kept being cut off. Its true voice sounded like an echo spreading out from beneath the emptiness that I couldn't even fathom. The surrounding air was bubbling with pitch-black status. I adjusted my own aura and continued to speak. I know that you are the forgotten evil, at least. It was here that the brows above Yi Gilyong's white eyes quivered just a little. It felt as if bitterly cold air suddenly was blanketing us. I endured it and spoke again. The evil that all the other stars have forgotten after too much time has passed by. The evil that was even ostracized by other evil, and was sealed away within the demon world's deepest underground. Quite often, it was told that the deepest part of hell was the dwelling of the apocalypse dragon. The reason why the great war of saints and demons was so famous was because of the Harmageddon burning in the flames of this terrifying dragon. The truth was, though, the apocalypse dragon wasn't the only calamity found in the early days of the great war of saints and demons. The calamity of the stars that swept across the worlds with yellow-colored storm clouds of insects, amongst all the names that had disappeared, there definitely existed a calamity with this title. Oh, the king of locusts, the ruler of the deepest pit. My words prompted a vicious storm to whip about in the air as a new message revealed itself. Character Yi Gilyong's sponsor has revealed its modifier. Constellation, ruler of the deepest pit, is now looking at you. The ruler of the deepest pit, Abaddon. Just like the other main characters of the Great War of Saints and Demons, it too was in existence on the level of myth grade. However, the masters of the wall dividing good and evil didn't acknowledge it as evil for the sake of their own battles, and to make matters worse, didn't even let it enter the ranks of the 72 demon kings of the demon world. And so, this being was more like an outer god now. Even though it was the great evil that dyed the galaxy with locust plague once upon a time, this being had to spend tens of thousands of years locked away within the prison of forgotten memories. This being was even betrayed by its own kins, the demons, while believing in the empty promise of others waking it up during the Age of Calamities. That was, until one human used grasshoppers as the method to clear the scenario one day. Fable, Grasshopper Catcher, has begun its storytelling. Yi Gilyong's fable that sprouted from our scenario had managed to awaken the ancient demon from its slumber. State your reason for summoning me, oh the arrogant. Constellation. I could easily sense this demon's hidden pain from its voice, filled with boundless hatred. It was ignored by its enemy, the good, while it was betrayed by its supposed ally, the evil. What do you think? I called you here to make you stop exploiting a little kid after you. Forced him into signing a contract with you. If you want to sign a contract with someone, then do it with me, instead. Wouldn't that be fairer? I only forgive your insolence, because you wrecked the Great War of Saints and Demons. Yi Gilyong's lips twisted ever so slightly to form a grin. This guy, it possessed the qualification of great evil, yet it decided not to participate in the Great War of Saints and Demons right till its conclusion. Hell, it even acted as if it didn't exist in the first place. I kind of understood why, though. That particular great fable was no longer a festival meant for this creature. The apocalypse dragon and Eden, the demon world. Watching them being destroyed was gratifying. Is that so? But, is it over with only that? Over. Abaddon. You're still evil. My words caused Yi Gilyong's brows to quiver. The great war of saints and demons is already over. Yeah, it has ended. But it'll start again in the future. And the scenario where you're the calamity might get created during then. Where everyone remembers your modifier, where everyone trembles from fear in front of your name. Why are you saying such things? Abaddon smiled as if it heard rather sweet-sounding remarks. I went straight to the topic. Let me not beat around the bush. You've saved up enough of your strength. Now, lend us your aid. And, why should I? Because even you would be annihilated if you don't. You already know very well that other constellations will never give you the time of day after we're all gone. I am the ancient evil. The constellations on the side of absolute evil will never acknowledge you as the most ancient evil. No one will stand on your side. And I guess you must have forgotten it, but there is that monster, Baal, waiting in the final scenario, too. Baal. Abaddon's voice trembled as if it was having a seizure. Baal, the demon king ranked number 1 in the pecking order. The sole existence from the demon world that had entered the final scenarios area, and also the demon king who had imprisoned Abaddon in the deepest pit, as well. You help us and stop the great apocalypse, then we shall grant you an opportunity to take your revenge on that guy. The surrounding air was trembling viciously. I continued to withstand the status tumbling within the air current and spoke up. Oh, the ruler of the deepest pit. Become the most ancient evil in the world we wish to create. When choosing to get in bed with the devil, you need to offer up a bait of this scale, at the least. I definitely needed Abaddon's powers in order to stop this calamity. Asterisk. 1 hour and 5 minutes remaining until the start of the great apocalypse. Finally, all the preparations were complete. I looked at my companions waiting on the side of the plaza and asked them, "Has Yu Yonghyuk woken up yet?" "No, not yet." Isiolwa replied, and I nodded my head. If he hadn't woken up yet, then we had to go with Plan B. I'll believe in you, everyone. We have no other choice now. The Plan B was actually the same, with a split into 2 groups and each fight an outer god king. The only thing different would be the composition of each group. The outer god the first team will fight is the living flame. The living flame, the god name of Uriel, who lived during the 999th turn. The one appearing in the Pacific Ocean is the master of the sunken island, but once the great apocalypse begins, the living flame will definitely make her appearance. She's targeting the secretive plotter, after all. I glanced at the sleeping secretive plotter, still trapped within the ceiling sphere, and continued on. For the time being, this is the list of the participants. Companions stared at me with tense eyes. Zhang Huiwen, Igilian. The main damage dealer of this group was Zhang Huiwen. The one possessing the strongest space-restricting power was Yu Seng'a, while no one even came close to Han Suyang's ability to conduct the battles. These 3 were going to form the mains of the team. Of course, that wasn't the end. Uriel, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, the Great Sage, sparks began dancing wildly in the air as soon as I said that. Constellation, demon-like Judge of Fire, is nodding her head. Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, grumbles that it doesn't wish to be ordered around. Constellation, Most Ancient Liberator, is guessing your intentions. Since our opponent was going to be Uriel from the 999th turn, we definitely had to send out our own Uriel. If luck was on our side, we might be able to see the disconnected film theory SFX once more. The Black Flame Dragon would no doubt be a great help here, and there was no need to even mention the Great Sage now that he had become a myth-grade constellation himself. I'd like breaking the Sky Sword Saint, Kyrios, Zhang Haiyang, and the rest of the Transcenders to be their backup, please. Leave it to us. The clearly excited Zhang Haiyang shouted out after she finally got a proper mission of her own. However, her enthusiasm should take a turn for the worse once she gets there. Both the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint and Kyrios nodded their heads, so I continued on. Finally. Hades, Persephone, I'd like you 2 to accompany the first team, please. Constellation, Father of the Rich Knight, is silently nodding his head. Constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, is looking at you worriedly. The expressions of my companions quietly listening until then finally began changing somewhat. The first one to open her lips was Zhang Huiwen. Hang on a minute. Is there a need to focus all the combat personnel on the first team? Basically, everyone is in the first team, isn't it? Who will be in the second team? E.g. Hai, E-Hai and Song SSI, and I will form the second team. What about other constellations? I didn't reply to her, prompting her eyes to narrow to a slit. Yet another nice-sounding suicidal plan. I spied Yu Seng'a next to her, smiling gently just then. Alright, if it's her, then she might side with me on this one. Someone is reciting the Constrictive Sutra. Her gentle lips began reciting something truly terrifying. I then spotted Han Suyang in the distance with her hand massaging her temples while shaking her head. I told you, it's not going to work. I urgently shouted out. Hang on. It's not a suicidal plan. It really is a proper plan. That's why I'm bringing along both Ji-hai and Hyeonsong SSI. I'm a myth-grade constellation now. You all saw how strong I'd become earlier, didn't you? Sure, we saw you hiding behind Yoonhyuk SSI and cheering him on. Please trust me. You all know what kind of an existence a myth-grade constellation is. It's none other than a myth-grade. Poseidon. Zeus. The great sage, heaven's equal. The demon king of salvation. Sounds like something weird is mixed up in there, though. My companions seemed to have fallen into the trap of uncertainty after I repeated the myth grade several more times. Indeed, the best brainwashing method was to repeat yourself. It was then a thunderclap exploded in the sky. Constellation, most ancient liberator, is glaring at you. The great sage spent his own probability to materialize his incarnation body and made his grand entrance along with the flashy lightning show. His majestic, platinum-hued hair danced above the somersault cloud. Magne, have you lost your mind? It's fine to send an indirect message, you know. You need to conserve your probability. Not all myth grades are equal myths. You're just a hatchling who has stepped into this domain only recently. This was my first time seeing the great sage come out this forcefully, and that flustered me somewhat. I deliberated on my options, before sighing out grandly and told everyone the truth. I too don't believe the combined strengths of the second team will be enough to kill a king. Then, what were you planning to do? The core of our plan this time is Blitzkrieg. Currently, we didn't have Yu Yoonhyuk, the core of the second team, with us. If we couldn't borrow the powers of the 1863rd regression turn, then didn't matter how the teams were split up, we still didn't have any guarantee of victory. Just one mistake, then forget about dividing and conquering our enemies, we'd get conquered, instead. In that case, there was only one way remaining to ensure everyone's survival. The survival of the second team is dependent on the first. You must defeat the living flame as speedily as possible and head to the Pacific Ocean. The goal of my team, Ji-hai, Hyeonsong SSI, and I, is to endure until all of you come and join us. This was the first stage in the plan that I came up with. 30 minutes later, Ji-hai, Hyeonsong, and myself disembarked to the Pacific Ocean. Right up until our departure, my companions were trying to change my mind, but I simply shook my head at them. The master of the sunken island managed to destroy the American continent simply by rising up. If we waited for that guy to get closer to the Korean peninsula, then every single nearby island would be destroyed even before the battle got underway. Going out to face our enemy head-on was the right call even when considering the accompanying risk. Constellation, maritime war god, is reading the water route with a deeply meaningful stare. Both Ji-hai and Hyeonsong looked quite tense. Especially the latter, as he was returning to scenarios after a period of absence. His expression was far more solemn than before. Constellation, bald general of justice, is busy polishing his head. Constellation, King Hungmu, is saddened by the fate of the Korean peninsula. The turtle dragon scythed past the ocean waves to go past the islands of Ulundo and Dokdo. Perhaps the sights of the latter left an impression on him, because Hyeonsong suddenly placed his hand on his chest and shouted out, "We shall protect our motherland." Constellation, last hero of Wangsanbeil, is nodding his head. I found it a bit hard to watch such a serious declaration, so I promptly went for a tackle. Hyeonsong SSI, you said you quit being a soldier, didn't you? It's not just soldiers that protect our nation, you know. He muttered his reply and looked down at his dog tags with sorrowful eyes. Before we parted ways from the rest of the companions, Zhang Huiwen fidgeted around with those tags for a long time before letting him go. You must stay alive, no matter what. Understand? Hyeonsong, now with the face of an innocent little bull, looked up into the sky and nodded his head. E.g. Hai watched this spectacle unfold and whispered something in my ear. Juicy, why does this feel like our death flag? We'll be fine. If anyone's dying today, it'll be Hyansong SSI only. By the way, will just us two, me and Hyansong Juicy, really be alright? Ing. I spread out a sheet on the ship's deck while explaining myself. This sheet was a DIY item I bought just now from the Dakibi bundle. My new goal was to complete this thing before we encounter our new enemy. I don't get it, though. Sure, I get why with Hyansong Juicy, but me? Is it because we're on the sea? Something like that. But, my sponsor is a historical. No, a fable grade. But, you clearly said that even a myth grade can't stop the guy about to show up, didn't you? For sure, what she said was correct. The maritime war god was an excellent constellation, sure, but he was a long way off from being referred to as Starstream's greatest constellation. It's not the general, but you that I believe in. Eh? The constellation being a fable grade doesn't mean his incarnation is also a fable grade, you see. E.g. Hai blinked her eyes as if she didn't really get it, but eventually, a smirk formed on her lips. What are you on about? I'm not even a constellation, you know. Well, true, you aren't one now. E.g. Hai had no idea of her own potential. She had no clue just how far she reached back in the original story. Constellation, maritime war god, nods his head after hearing your words. Perhaps the general was already well aware of it. E. Hyansong finished shooting the solo performance of Romeo and Juliet and approached us. By the way, Dokjo SSI? What have you been making until now? This? I showed him the item I'd been making. Its explanation immediately popped up when I did. Plus. Item information. Name, the white flag of complete surrender, grade, SSS. Explanation, it's a surprising item that allows the enemy to see your surrender from very far away. Be careful to not let your allies discover you using it. Plus. E. Hyansong formed a disbelieving expression as if he had seen something weird and rubbed his eyes a few times before he looked at me. I grinned back. I told you, I'm not planning to die this time. But, this, isn't this. The moment you see them, we must surrender. Then we try to talk to them. Understand? Fighting won't buy us any time whatsoever. As soon as they show up. Juicy. Something's coming. Almost at the same time with E.g. Hai's cry, we all spotted a ginormous wall approaching us from the horizon. It was a wall of waves reaching hundreds of meters high. That wall was steadily encroaching upon us. You have entered the Great Apocalypse scenario area prematurely. You're recommended to exit the scenario area immediately. If you fail to exit, the Great Apocalypse scenario will begin. Of course, I wasn't planning to leave. Hidden scenario, Great Apocalypse has begun. The invasion of outer gods has commenced. Please survive this calamity. The moment the scenario explanation ended, the gigantic waves of status crashed into us. This status was so great that all the hair on my body was standing up real high, even though I was supposed to be of myth-grade constellation now. The calamity that not even stars can't survive. This is the Great Apocalypse. The march of the outer gods, for the annihilation of a world. Fable, Demon King of Salvation, has begun its storytelling. I unleashed the appropriate fable to protect my companions and looked up at the wall of waves. The howl of the outer god resounded out from somewhere. The outer gods were piled up like layers in between the waves. And a lone battleship rode on top of this wall as if to reign over it. The vessel was an intimately familiar shape. The dragon-shaped figurehead spat out a violent lick of flames. The turtle dragon. That was definitely the turtle dragon. If one wanted to point out the obvious difference between that one and our own turtle dragon, then the enemy's was at least 20 times larger. Juicy. The frightened E.g. Hai was now staring at me, her expression asking me if I knew this already. I nodded my head. I wasn't 100% sure, but did expect this to happen. I knew the list of survivors from the 999th turn better than anyone, after all. The calamity of the Western world, the master of the sunken island. Beyond the waves splitting up, we could hear the voice of a certain girl who had witnessed the 999th turn's conclusion. Load the cannons.